yesterday with some folks, and I changed a bunch of settings, and I should have used a different profile, and I didn't. And I've been slapped on the wrist by Andrew for not using OBS in the proper way.
We will dock your pay appropriately.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate that.
Your producer's fee.
My producer's fee. So yes, to everybody out there that's using OBS, please remember to use profiles when you're making changes, especially to like really important things like, you know, your live streaming channel. Anyways, so we had a request from Nishant. If possible, can we please talk about Alert Manager and Prometheus and how y'all would prefer it being set up, emails, other alerts, etc., that kind of thing. Like, let's talk about Alert Manager for a minute. And if look, who would like to give background on Prometheus and what Alert Manager is? I can, but I feel like we have plenty of audience or plenty of people to do that.
So Luke, Evan, I'll default to you all.
You want to do this one, Luke?
I can give a brief description, and then you can fill in
yeah,
anything I missed there.
So just high level overview. That's it.
So Prometheus is just essentially a metrics collector that we use in OpenShift to gather metrics from pods and nodes, so we can keep an eye on, you know, CPU usage and memory usage and all that. And with that, we have another piece of software that we deploy with OpenShift called Alert Manager. That so Prometheus has alerts set up in it, so you can basically, when certain thresholds are hit, you know, alerts will be fired. Like, you know, if you're getting low on memory or storage or something like that, or a node goes down. And then Alert Manager gives you a way to set up notifications. So like if you want to be emailed about specific alerts that happen in the cluster, you can get emails on it. You can have it call a webhook, things like that. So Evan, do you have anything to add to that?
No, other than we really probably won't have a preference on whether it's email or text. It's really completely dependent on the end user and what you're going to be using the Prometheus and Alert Manager stacks for. For instance, if you're using it on your production environment, you probably will want it to text you on your weekend to interrupt you, versus if it's your dev or QA environment, you might not want a text. You might just want an email in your work email that you can ignore till Monday.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Like, you don't necessarily want Alert Manager alerting you on unimportant things during your weekends.
So let me ask you all, from a support perspective, do you have suggestions, recommendations, or thoughts on like monitoring thresholds? Like, when should I get an alert? What
should I explode? Yeah.
I think generally we have set the alerts that we ship by default to fairly reasonable values. With that said, if you're customizing things such as, give an example, if you have a giant storage data store, right? And let's hypothetically say the upper bound that the alert is set for is 80%. If you have a petabyte data store, you might have a plethora of data left. When you still have 20% left, you might want to customize that alert to be 10%, 5%, something that you deem to be critical at that point. There's a lot of parameters that go into that, like how fast can you react to that alert being hit? How fast can you increase the data store when that alert is hit?
Yeah. So my background, before I was a vendor, I was a customer.
Yeah, same.
I was a virtualization admin, architect, storage admin, storage architect, and the last point that you hit there was really important to me, because it doesn't matter what the threshold is, so long as you give yourself enough time to react. So, you know, one of the ones with storage, right? So how quickly am I filling up that data store, and how long does it take me to react to whatever that scenario is? So if the solution is, well, I'm out of storage, now I have to go out and buy more, and my purchasing cycle is 3 months. Yeah, it takes me 3 months to get new disks in. Well, if my growth rate is X, you know, gigabytes, terabytes a day, then I need to go backwards from that, and that's how much free space I need to be able to continue, not disrupt the ability to provide that service. Maybe it's a fluke. There's always the difference between regular growth and something has broken and something is actively consuming storage. I had that happen once. We had a developer that created a Perl script that went haywire. This was back in like 2007, 2006.
Okay.
So they
this is a very similar story to I went through once.
Created a Perl script that went haywire and was logging the same line to a text file that grew to something like 6 terabytes in size.
Okay, so my story isn't that bad, but damn.
Yeah. And this is 2007, right? 6 terabytes in 2007 is a lot of capacity.
Yeah. So yeah, my story is like 2010. A friend of mine, coworker, who actually works at Red Hat now in the support org, I believe. He, Perl developer, wrote something that needed to run for. He knew it needed to run for a long period of time, but so he left it running during lunch. And pages started going off, and we were the on-call team. He and I, we were both at lunch at the same time. So we're messaging back, just kill this program. It'll be fine. Because we couldn't get into the network from where we were sitting at our lunch table, but we were like hauling ass back to the office. Yeah, it was ridiculous. But it was filling up our storage array just like that. It happens more than you realize.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think, very much to your point, Evan, I think that you definitely have to take into account how quickly you can react and, take that into account when you're creating those alerts, those thresholds. A long time ago, I did an interview with Gene Kim, and we were asking Gene, kind of what is DevOps? Why is DevOps important? And I'll never forget the answer that he gave, which was, it brings humanity back to IT, because everybody is a part of the process, right? It means that oftentimes now everybody has a vested interest, which means that hopefully the ops team, right, the guys that are way down at the bottom, stop getting calls at 2 a.m. on Saturdays, because something has gone haywire, and rather everybody is taken care of it. So I think there's also the softer side. There's not just the technology side of set the threshold to this, react within this amount of time. There's also the, how do we prevent this from happening? How do we work as a team, et cetera, et cetera. I know I've gone off on a tangent here.
No, but like, this is a good tangent to go off on, because I'm sure the support folks here understand that, like, when you have an outage, you need to learn from it, right? And all of our customers are trying to learn from their outages every time they happen and bake in new knowledge into their institutions to help not have that outage happen again, right? But we have to think, we Red Hat have to think about everybody's outage, right? Like, not just root causes, but like, how do we help prevent them from ever happening, right? And I'm sure there's like this long list of things support goes through with almost every customer, or every day there's like this like high number of like this kind of phone call. Like, what is that? Like, do you have stats on like what your most asked question is? I'm just curious.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we definitely have frequently used or frequently hit issues, and we are highly encouraged to write KCSs on how to diagnose, troubleshoot, and prevent those issues.
Nice. Yeah. Good.
So a question for you, can I subscribe to those? Like, is there a way to see every time a new KCS is created?
Interesting.
I'm not sure you want to be alerted every time a new KCS
not alerted, but like, if I had it as
yeah,
like a side thing in my reader, right, that I could look at every once in a while, that'd be pretty cool.
Yeah, you can definitely see the most linked KCSs. That actually might be more what you're looking for, rather than getting them right when they're created.
Well, Andrew wants them right when they're created. I just want the most linked ones.
Yeah.
So that also brings up another question that I have for you CE folks. Insights. What's that look like from your perspective? I would imagine that as you see these questions, as you see these problems that lead to KCS articles, it also leads to insights rules.
Hopefully.
Yes, it is very it's not quite mature yet, but we are still creating the process where we retroactively look at cases that would be prime candidates for insights rules, and someone within CEE drives creating that insights rule to trigger whether it's when a must gather or source report is uploaded to the case, the insights rule is ran against that data set, whatever it is, whether it's plain text file, whatever, looks for a string or some rule that is coded into the insights rule. And then it says, hey, maybe this KCS or solution is a good fit to this issue, or maybe it's a known issue, or any number of things.
Yeah, so I dropped in the chat an article, an Access article about how to proactively search KCS and Bugzilla via the CLI for potential product issues, just so folks know, like, there's a way to do that right from your interface, right? Like,
Did you just link a KCS about KCS?
yes, very meta, very meta.
And just for those wondering, what does KCS stand for? Does anybody know?
I did, but I actually forgot. Evan, do you remember?
Oh, heavens.
Knowledge something solution.
Knowledge custom
Knowledge
solution.
base.
Knowledge centric.
Centric.
What I was
okay,
told.
yeah.
Knowledge
Knowledge-centric.
centric solution. Yeah.
Interesting. So speaking of insights, right? Like, I worked as part of the management BU for my first year here at Red Hat. Like, insights takes like a sliver of the SOS report data, right? Is my understanding. Is like, what amount of information do you get from insights versus SOS that's helpful to y'all? I mean, is there a differentiation there? I mean, do you always go to the SOS report, or are you looking more towards insights potentially for things?
So insights is only really going to be helpful if there is a rule coded into insights that would point us to something. If it's there's always going to be much more helpful information in a source report, whether or not you know how to read it and read the tea leaves, so to speak. That's the secret sauce.
The secret sauce is reading the tea leaves of the sauce report, which, if you're not familiar with that functionality in RHEL, is SOS-report, I believe. And it will generate a report of your system status that we can then get at Red Hat and look at and say, hey, here we see things that might be an issue, right? Like, this running process is failing because X. Or in the case of insights, one of the scenarios John Spinks once told me is that a customer had been dealing with an Oracle database bug for like a year and a half, and they turned on insights on like a handful of instances, and it detected like this incompatible database with kernel issue that neither Oracle nor the customer had, been discovered, but we knew because we had customers that run Oracle so much. So it's interesting to always flip those services on and get the actual insights of Red Hat into your environment. So if you're a potential insights customer and you're not using it and you're curious more about it, please let us know. We can definitely bring on some folks to talk about it.
Brings up a great point. If even no matter how knowledgeable you are looking at a source report, if you're not looking for the right things, you'll never find the root cause, versus insights has those rules already ingrained in it. There is no prior knowledge that you have to have when using the insights tool to actually find a root cause or a possible solution.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I'm just happy that you brought up John Spinks.
Yeah, I need to get John on the channel. It
just
dawned on
thinking
me
about
this morning. It's shocking that I haven't had him on with his wealth of verbal and audio talents.
You've known John for a long time.
Yeah, John and I are friends from like way back. We used to work at College Foundation way back in 2012, 11, 10, something like that, like way back. And then he worked at NetApp for a while, and we were still like lunch buddies because I was part of this group now that always went to lunch on Fridays together. So that's how we actually like became friends, was like going to lunch together constantly. While yes, we worked together at College Foundation in North Carolina, we never really worked directly together. Like, it was always like tangentially, but we always went to lunch together, which was fun when he was working at NetApp. But now he's here at Red Hat, and it's super great. And he's taught me so much about being a TMM. It's amazing.
Yep. No, I knew him at NetApp. We literally sat right next to each other for
you're so lucky.
Better part of 5 years.
Oh my gosh, that's why you're so good.
Yeah, he taught me a lot. He and Chris Gebhardt's.
Oh, wow.
Still over it, adding that up. Anyways,
Anyways,
enough reminiscing.
yes.
So alerts are good. Alert thresholds set based off of basically your ability to react.
Yeah.
Right. So actionable. Alert fatigue. So Luke, I know you've been kind of quiet. I want to make sure that you have the opportunity to speak up. Evan, of course. Any thoughts, any opinions on alert fatigue?
You know, I honestly don't have a lot of opinions myself. Usually I find my work with alerts is like just helping customers figure out the best way to get it set up, you know, for whatever their needs are.
Mhm.
So I haven't seen it from the perspective of potentially receiving a ton of alerts. Though we definitely had situations where customers are like, "Hey, I'm getting inundated. You know, what do I do?" Or I've got this alert that that's triggering that doesn't seem to be correlating to anything serious in the cluster. Like it may just be kind of I'm trying to think of an example. But basically there's no, sometimes it's tricky to figure out what's actually causing them. And so you may just be getting inundated with emails and your cluster looks like it's running fine. So sometimes it's tricky to track those down. So
wait, you mean Kubernetes and distributed systems are hard?
Yeah, they're a little hard sometimes, a little tricky.
So any suggestions on configuring those alerts? You said that you go through that with customers.
What's the most common like alert config?
Yeah.
Oh man, that's a good question. I mean, Alert Manager gives you a lot of flexibility. So I mean, it takes a little work, but you can basically, filter things down to, I only want to receive, notifications on specific alerts that we provide through Prometheus. So if you only want like critical alerts, you can do that. You can send some alerts to email, some alerts to a webhook. You could subdivide into different emails. And I know we've had some customers do this where they basically want alerts per namespace maybe sent, to certain emails. So they have specific teams getting those alerts. So there's a ton of flexibility with it.
How would you set up per namespace alerting? I mean, that sounds cool as hell.
Offhand, I can't remember how to do it, but I'm pretty sure you can basically do selections or filters on namespaces or other attributes that are attached
to the objects.
Alerts. Yeah. So as long as it's a piece of data on the alert, you can do something with it. You can use that to route it, to wherever you want it.
Yeah, per namespace alerting sounds brilliant, right? Like this group of admins or devs gets these alerts, this group of devs gets that alerts, right? Like, or I can send, like there's that line where it's like it's OpenShift versus it's the application, right? Like I can make that determination in advance, right? Like
yeah. That's what I was just getting ready to bring up. If we get asked about application monitoring using, the default Prometheus Alert Manager stack, which I think is on the roadmap. That to me sounds like a perfect opportunity of, there's always that one admin, right? Who, I was that admin. I want all the alerts. Let me filter them out using my email or something like that.
Oh God.
And I can imagine adding application alerts on top of that would just create a nightmare scenario. So having something like that can apply that filtering, helpful.
Yeah.
So Abdul asks, is it possible to send alerts from Alert Manager to Kafka?
I've never actually heard of that use case before.
Me either.
I'm not sure whether it would be possible.
Abdul,
does
please.
Kafka
You can
have a mechanism where it can.
Yeah, like what's the use
like
case there, Abdul?
Yeah.
Like that's an interesting question.
If it has a webhook.
Yeah, if it has a webhook, you can do it
probably.
Yeah, if it has a webhook, you can do it for sure. But like, I'm curious more about like the actual use case, right? Like, why are you sending alerts to Kafka? Is there something else that's going to come along and do something with it? You got an operator for managing alerts, maybe? I don't know. That's interesting.
I don't know. I could see some potential if you're shoving all alerts in, doing analytics against those.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah, being your own kind of like metadata filterer.
I think you could also, if you really want to get fancy with it, do some proactive, preemptive type of operations.
Well, that's where I was thinking the operator like functionality would come in, right? Like something comes in the Kafka, triggers operator, done, right? Like fix the problem before it even like could be alerted on, right?
Yeah, although that would depend on an operator existing.
Right, which in that case, I think you would just instantiate the operator in your application, but that could be a very like legacy application you don't want to touch potentially. So that's why I'm curious about the potential use case here. Which, Abdul, if you don't mind, please chime in. But what other fun things can you do with Alert Manager other than Kafka if it has a webhook?
Yeah, I will say that, you know, it's funny on the tech marketing side, we don't have a lot of long-lived clusters, right?
No, we don't.
We go through clusters like, you know, children go through candy on Halloween.
Yeah.
I have one that I run, but it's pretty disposable, so I ignore most of the alerts and stuff like that. And it'll run for a few weeks at a time, and then it invariably gets destroyed because I need to test the next version or this other feature or something else entirely. You know, when
I'm trying to run, and the drive might actually be at my front door right now. The 6th drive, because I could only order 5 at a time from Amazon for the server that I'm trying to build over on the other side of the house, across the office here, is like going to be my de facto like OpenShift cluster, and the intent is for it to be long lived, which will give me the experience that Luke and everybody else has here on this call of having to deal with, yes, you're building applications on top of OpenShift and you're upgrading OpenShift and you're moving the applications along with it, kind of thing, right? Like I want to have that experience, and I want to kind of have that. I do have business class internet. We were talking about that warm up to the call, the stream where Comcast decided to cut my internet to upgrade me. The idea here would be that I would actually start using it to actually really run some real services just from the house, right? Like that don't need high latency or high availability necessarily, right? But like it would give me the experience of having these problems, because I haven't, I used OpenShift as a DevOps consultant for about a year, and then I became a vendor, right? Like I became part of the problem essentially, right? So having that hands-on experience, I think, is going to be helpful for anyone. How do either of y'all recommend getting that like hands-on experience in a potentially limited situation as some new people here on the channel would have?
So something beyond like OC cluster up kind of thing.
Well, I mean, like we have CRC, but
or CRC, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's great ways to run like 3-node clusters if you have the capacity, right? Wow, there's somebody asking, what will be the recommendation to run a telco workload on OpenShift? We have a whole team for that.
Yeah, so that's an interesting one. There's actually a couple of questions.
There is a few questions, yeah.
So let's detract for a little bit. Do you see any challenge if I deploy OpenShift on OpenStack for network function virtualization, NFV, particularly using Dpdk? Use cases related to deploying low latency application on OpenShift on OpenStack or vSphere. So challenges, I would say no, beyond the simple compatibility, right? Making sure that everything fits together, that all the right switches are turned on, etc. It is a supported use case, and we are continuing to grow the edge, right, type of use cases or the edge capabilities of OpenShift. There's a huge roadmap, as Chris just said. There's a whole team of people that are dedicated to OpenShift at the edge and OpenShift for telco.
Yeah.
So, and I'm sure that Chris can have somebody from that team onto a dedicated live stream for that at some point in the future.
Yeah, I mean, if you're interested, I can't say your username on YouTube, but they're GNCS79. We can definitely get the telco team on, and we have somebody on our team that could be helpful for that.
And I can. So from an NFV perspective, so I'll focus on the virtualization part. So OpenShift virtualization. I don't believe Dpdk is there yet for OpenShift virtualization. SRIOV, yes. Dpdk, no. Although I'm sure it's on the roadmap, but I don't know where. So if you are doing CNV, which is container,
Container
no,
native. No.
so network. Anyways, whatever the container version, container network function, CNF.
Yes. Yeah.
CNV is the old name for OpenShift virtualization.
Yeah.
Then sure, right, all of that would work as expected. With NFV and OpenShift virtualization, Dpdk would be the barrier there.
Right.
So recommendation to run a telco workload on OpenShift. I think it's, if we're talking like real-time kernel writes, that type of stuff, there's a whole separate set of stuff that I have, like I know what VRAN stands for, but I don't know what it does or any of those things. So we definitely need to get like Mark or somebody like that on to talk about that particular topic.
I mean, this is the first time like Mark has come up in conversation on this channel, so I'm super interested in this telco use case. And you're building a, it sounds cool, right? Like,
yeah,
we should definitely have him on.
In general, OpenShift is OpenShift. So deploying to like a 3-node cluster, a quote unquote compact cluster should work exactly the same. You're creating schedulable masters. You just want to make sure that you have the capacity for all of the different workloads, right? It's no longer 4 CPUs and 16 gigabytes of RAM as the minimum. It's, 20 or 6 CPUs and 24 gigs of RAM or something like that when you're doing a consolidated cluster. So being aware of those types of things. Other than that, workload is workloads for the most part.
How do I log into OpenShift as a cluster admin? A frequently asked question of our own, I feel like. Like all the various ways to get that information if you stood up the cluster yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually can answer that. So when you stand up a cluster, you will have a system:/admin kubeconfig created, and you can use that. And that has the cluster admin role associated to that kubeconfig. But I'm assuming you have your own user. So you will want someone with cluster admin privileges to give your OpenShift user the cluster admin role and assign that to your user.
Separation of responsibilities is very important inside OpenShift. Too much power and you can shut down the whole thing.
And there is, so funny enough, here, I'm going to share my screen.
Oh, okay. Here we go.
Hopefully this doesn't make my laptop angry. I say that, it's already angry.
Wow, Claudio says, we deployed Jitsi Meet on OpenShift as a telco software. It's rather easy. Wow.
That's awesome.
That's awesome. We have talked about using Jitsi versus, Zoom for this channel, but right now, like running our own Jitsi server is just not in the cards. But go ahead, please, Andrew.
Yeah, so from a documentation perspective, we cover very quickly how to create a cluster admin user. So just here on the RBAC page, sorry, I jumped too far. So using RBAC to define and apply permissions, you can see authentication and authorization. Yep.
Thanks.
And then, so I'll drop that into the chat there. It's a one-liner to define those cluster admin users. Now, that being said, is that a good idea? It's going to depend on the person in the organization and all of that. Luke, Evan, I'm sure you have some interesting stories of people who were given too much permissions.
Yep.
Yeah, if you got a good one, let me know. Like,
I haven't seen too many cases related to it, but one in particular. Sometimes you'll see like a project will just disappear all of a sudden, like running critical applications, and nobody knows what happened. Like nobody knows who did it. They didn't have auditing on, things like that. Maybe so they're just trying to figure out like, well, how do we prevent this from happening in the future? And then in that situation, I think everybody had cluster admin. So
the biggest no-no in all of OpenShift. Well, not the biggest, but definitely one of the biggest.
It's a lot of power, so you got to be careful with it. Yeah.
Exactly.
A perfect example is, do you want your developers to run privileged containers?
Yep.
Right. Like
if you're giving them all cluster admin and their applications want to be privileged, then that might be fine, but you don't really want your developers to be in that position of power. You want them to use least workable permissions, right? Like you want them to not be using privileged containers. So you keep that namespace separation between the containers and the host.
And
Right. Like you don't want to create a backdoor into your own cluster.
Yeah, an extension of that is the OC debug on nodes, right? Giving them the ability to access nodes and the file systems and units and services and everything else that's running inside of there is no bueno.
No good. Yeah. So let's see.
Yeah, my favorite story of too much permissions. I was working with the U.S. government, working with DoD, and we had an Air Force E3 who accidentally did a change mod -X recursively en route. So basically, after the command finished, nothing could execute. So you couldn't go back in and
you couldn't change anything.
Yeah, change mod no longer could execute. So you couldn't change mod to that was a fun one.
Oh God. Restore from backup. Off you go.
And that was precisely what happened. It was a Solaris 8 system.
Oh Lord.
So yeah, Christian talking about plumbing interfaces the last time that we were live streaming together. Solaris. There you go.
Yeah.
Let's see, a couple more questions I've seen come across here. I have a Prometheus set up on bare metal, and I have OpenShift Prometheus and its own node exporter. I want the bare metal server to get the OCP node exporter data. How to set this up? So if I'm understanding correctly, there is an external Prometheus that he wants to have scrape the OpenShift node exporter data.
Sounds right.
So that would be in addition to the internal Prometheus.
It would be a node exporter for the node itself. So you would want to look at the machine controller.
So node exporter is already running, right? It's a part of the default monitoring stack.
Well, you would need to export the machine data.
No, that would already be there as a part of the node
it should be there, right?
So it's basically allowing an external service access to the node exporter data. And I think the answer to that is if you know the node IPs, you should be able to access it. It's the authentication piece. If there's authentication, and I don't know, Luke or Evan, if you know off the top of your head, if there's authentication required to access that particular service or not. I think there is.
I'm not sure. You may be able to hit the metrics endpoint. I know like if there's a metrics endpoint on things, that I don't know that you have to have authentication for that, but I'd have to verify that.
Well, doesn't it depend on the endpoint itself?
It may, yes, it may.
But
it's certainly possible.
Yeah.
If it does require authentication, you could just get that, and you should be able to access the data from the node exporter.
Oh, Mr.
Well, let's see if we can find out. No.
Oh boy. With your loud keyboard.
I know. It's I need the here. It goes through the desk.
Goes through the desk.
Yeah, that's what you're hearing. It's not the key clicks.
It's hitting the desk.
It's my sausages banging on the thing, and it goes through the desk and up the arm.
You need I got a leather mat underneath my keyboard for just that reason.
That's what I just grabbed as a piece of foam that I use underneath it.
That's amazing. Still hear it though.
Yeah, just a little bit.
That's fine. Now using Project OpenShift monitoring on.
Yeah. So if we look inside of here, we should see all the node exporters.
Right.
Right. So this is the machine set that represents all the node exporters.
So if we OC describe one of them, what do we get?
Not that.
Oh, goodness.
That's my tech ready presentation on OpenShift virtualization.
Good for you. There we go.
So if we look here, which pod is this? That's the init container. We don't care about that. Containers, node exporter. So you can see it's listening on localhost only.
So you would have to modify that. And to do that,
I don't know that you could modify it. I would think maybe the most you could probably work around it by doing something like deploy a pod inside the cluster that effectively proxies that data out. However, I would say probably the simplest solution is to simply forward the data, or, basically federate the Prometheuses.
Get them working together.
So that way they can talk to each other and access each other, because you can access externally the Prometheus instance. So let the one OpenShift Prometheus, the internal, the default metrics collection Prometheus, collect all that data, and then query that Prometheus for the data instead of scraping the nodes directly.
Right. Yeah, don't scrape the nodes. Use something else. Get it from that. Cool.
I don't know. Thoughts?
I'm just curious, is there a proxy container running in the node exporter as well?
Oh,
Seems
good
like there should
question.
be.
Well, as a part of this pod definition, there's an RBAC proxy.
Wow.
Let's see.
Upstream is local 9100.
Yeah, so that's the one forwarding upstream.
Okay. So Christian says it would be Prometheuses.
Is it like moose and mooses? Meese?
Meesuses.
By the way, as a former member of the Navy, a Navy chief, a group of Navy chiefs, does not appreciate being called chiefs.
Hey, chiefs.
So,
being former Air Force, a group of chief master sergeants do not appreciate being called chiefs. Unless they are actually sitting on a panel or something,
knife, knives, chiefs. No, it doesn't work that way.
Doesn't work. No, it's chiefs. That doesn't work either.
So yeah, it appears that, and we can make an attempt to hit one of my nodes here on port 9100. Oops, what just happened? So I think there's a node at
brave
65.
user you are.
Oh, it did respond with something.
Oh, okay.
I did not expect this to respond.
I didn't. Oh, unauthorized. So if you authorized it, if you federated, you'd be good.
Yeah. So if you could figure out, so this is a node. This is the IP address for worker 0 in my cluster, and this is the port that we were just looking at. So Luke, I think it was you who asked about what's that proxy, and I realized that the proxy isn't specifying an IP address, unlike the exporter up here, which is specifying an IP address. So I think that means it's automatically listening. I think
on everything.
Yeah, it's just looking at the upstream of being on localhost only. So I think if you could figure out what those credentials are, which if I had to guess are in a config map or a secret, somewhere inside of here. I don't even know where to look through all of these things.
Me either.
Yeah, you could probably
node
use
exporter, node exporter tokens. There's 2 of them right there. Maybe that would be it. I don't know.
The Prometheus one might work as well.
Yeah.
So one of these, and then figure out how to pass that in the URL, or it's probably basic authentication. That may work, but again, I don't know if that's the recommended way of doing it, so much as querying Prometheus. Metrics collection has its own overhead. The more times you scrape it, the more times it's going to incur that overhead, right? CPU cycles, etc.
Right.
So that may or may not be an issue. I mean, we are talking reading a web page from Prometheus node exporter.
Right.
But yeah, I would think certainly from a, you would have to take into account if it's IPI every time a node is added, right? Or removed, having to take that into account, etc. So, but it does seem possible if you can figure out that username and password.
That's super interesting.
Let's see. I know we've only got about 1.5 minutes or 2 minutes left. So
yeah,
I'm quickly looking through setting up a BSS. I'm not sure what BSS platform for telecom on OpenShift over Red Hat virtualization. Any recommendations to watch out for? Nothing off the top of my head. Again, OpenShift is OpenShift. So The OpenShift on Rev roadmap is, so look in the next version for things like the CSI provisioner for OpenShift storage domains. So you'll be able to add that in and be able to dynamically provision storage there. I think they're also doing away right now. If you do IPI on Rev, it asks for a DNS VIP. I think that'll also go away in the next version, if I remember correctly. So it will change a little bit, but for the most part, it's Rev and it's OpenShift, and they work great together.
And that's the plan, right? Like forever.
I don't know. I hopefully Luke or Evan, you'll say like, oh no, we see this problem all of the time. Definitely take this into account.
Nothing that comes to mind.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. There we go. All right. Well, thank you very much for joining, everyone. We really appreciate your time today.
Yeah. So I think we have one last question that I can address real quick. Can I create a master and worker architecture with OpenShift in a local machine using Virtualbox? Yes. Just
Totally.
deploy all the nodes using the bare metal / non-integrated method.
Yeah.
It won't be supported, right? But
right. Yeah.
You can certainly get up and running and test and experiment if you want to. You can also do it with KVM. You can also do it with Hyper-V. You can also do it with any number of other things on your local box.
Yep.
That sounds like a perfect use case for code-ready workspaces, though.
Yeah,
code-ready containers, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, don't get confused. But yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
All right.
So I think since we all have noon meetings or 11 a.m., Luke, I don't know if you're still in our time zone. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in for the inaugural OpenShift Administrator Office Hours. So thank you to both Luke and Evan. Really appreciate you joining us along with our audience. So look forward to our future shows. I don't know, Chris, we should discuss whether or not we'll publish any topics or anything like that. But in the future, continuing to be Wednesdays at 11 a.m. Eastern time. And I'm not going to embarrass myself by trying to do the math for other time zones.
1500 UTC.
There we go. And we have shows planned out through, I think, February or March of next year with various topics. So look forward to all of these in the future. Please feel free to continue to submit questions. I'll keep an eye on the chat throughout my next meeting and stuff like that, so we can answer those. But thank you, everybody, for attending, for listening, for watching, and look forward to the next one.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone. Take it easy.
Thank you.
Thanks.